Billionaire's wife humiliated the black CEO. Moments later, he erased a $2B empire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. People like you don't belong here. The words cut through the ballroom's golden air like a crack in glass. Conversations froze mid-laughter. The orchestra hesitated, one wrong note trembling in the silence before the room remembered to breathe again. Marcus Carter stood at the center of the scene, tuxedo immaculate, eyes calm beneath the chandelier light. The wine dripped down his white shirt, deep red spreading like a slow insult. Across from him, the billionaire's wife still held her half-empty glass, her hand trembling only slightly, as though part of her couldn't believe what she'd just done in front of 200 people. Then she smiled, not with apology, but with entitlement. "Oh, relax," she said lightly, her tone laced with false charm. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to spill." Her husband shifted uneasily beside her, unsure whether to scold or stay silent. The rest of the guests chose silence, safer, smoother, less memorable. Marcus looked down at his shirt, then back up at her. His voice, when it came, was soft. "No," he said. "You meant something." A few people exhaled sharply, as though the room itself had flinched. The woman blinked, caught off guard by the steadiness in his tone. "Excuse me?" Moxding of lasted. "You meant to remind me this isn't my room," Marcus said, each word deliberate, unhurried. "But you forgot one thing." He set his glass down gently, the sound barely audible over the murmurs, now spreading through the tables. "I don't need to belong," he said. "I own the company that built it." A hush fell over the gala. The guests exchanged quick, darting looks. Someone near the stage whispered, "Wait, is that?" but never finished the sentence. The woman laughed again, brittle this time. "Well, congratulations," she said, her mask cracking. "Money doesn't buy class." Marcus's gaze didn't waver. Neither does arrogance. The orchestra stopped pretending to play. The chandeliers, bright and merciless, caught every uncomfortable face in the room, the kind of audience that only exists when power shifts quietly. The billionaire husband tried to step in. "Let's not make a scene," he muttered, attempting to guide his wife away. But Marcus didn't move. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a handkerchief, dabbing the wine from his sleeve, slow, deliberate, dignified. Then he turned slightly toward the guests, his voice steady enough to command silence. "It's fascinating," he said, "how quickly respect turns conditional when color enters the conversation." Someone gasped. Another tried to laugh it off, but the sound died before it reached their lips. The woman's confidence faltered. "You're twisting my words," she snapped. Marcus met her gaze. "No," he said, "I'm clarifying them." Before anyone could respond, his phone buzzed quietly in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, one message from Rachel. "Everything ready if you give the word." He typed back a single word, "Proceed." Then he lifted his head, calm once more. "Enjoy the evening," he said softly. "It's going to be shorter than you think." He walked away, leaving behind silence heavy enough to drown in. The billionaire's wife watched him go, the red stain on his shirt reflected in the golden wine she still held. For the first time that night, she wasn't sure who had just been humiliated. As the whispers began to ripple again through the glittering crowd, the orchestra resumed its song, but the melody had changed. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity, justice, and self-control under fire, hit like and subscribe. These stories are born from truth. Now, back to Marcus Carter. The gala resumed, but the air never recovered. The laughter returned. Yes, too loud, too forced, the kind that tried to erase what had just happened but only made it echo louder. The chandeliers still sparkled. The orchestra still played. Yet something in the rhythm had broken. Marcus sat back down at his table, the wine stain on his shirt catching every flicker of gold light. He didn't move to hide it. Let them see it, he thought. Let them remember what it looked like when silence lost its comfort. Across the room, the billionaire's wife, Evelyn Hale, pretended nothing had happened. Her smile was back, sculpted and sharp. Her husband murmured to her under his breath, "You shouldn't have said that." "Oh, please," she whispered, still smiling for the cameras. He's not going to ruin a $2 billion partnership over a glass of wine. But she didn't know Marcus Carter. Rachel, seated a few tables away, watched him carefully. She recognized that stillness, the same calm he wore before every strategic earthquake. She discreetly checked her phone. One unread message from him, timestamped minutes ago. One word. Proceed. Across the city, inside Horizon's headquarters, a private network came alive. Teams moved like shadows, closing accounts, reversing signatures, freezing pending transfers. The system that Evelyn's husband depended on was quietly deleting him from existence. Back at the gala, Evelyn stood and lifted her glass again, voice sweet as champagne. A toast, she announced, smiling toward Marcus's table. To partnerships built on grace and mutual respect. A ripple of laughter followed, the kind that only cruelty finds funny. Marcus didn't raise his glass. He just watched her, his face unreadable, like a man waiting for the wind to change. Evelyn smirked. Oh, come on, Mr. Carter. No hard feelings, right? He finally stood slowly, the movement enough to hush half the room. The orchestra hesitated once more. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim under the weight of attention. Marcus lifted his glass. You're right, he said evenly. No hard feelings. Relief crossed her face too early. He continued. In fact, I was just thinking about how partnerships reveal character. Sometimes, he paused, glancing at her husband, they reveal it too late. A hush spread through the room, subtle and electric. Evelyn's husband blinked, sensing danger. Marcus, but Marcus raised his glass higher. To clarity, he said. May every deal show us who we're really shaking hands with. They drank or pretended to. His words lingered longer than the wine. A waiter hurried to replace Marcus's stained napkin, but he stopped him with a quiet nod. Leave it, Marcus said. It's a reminder. Rachel's phone buzzed again. One final message from Horizon's legal division. All transfers complete. Hale account terminated. Public filing queued. She looked up just as Evelyn sat down again, smirking. Well, that wasn't so hard, Evelyn said. Maybe we'll still have a future together after all. Marcus smiled faint, almost kind. You already did. Evelyn frowned. Did? He leaned closer, his voice calm as glass. It ended about 7 minutes ago. Before she could respond, her husband's phone buzzed. Then again. Then again. He looked down, confusion curdling into panic. Wait, what is this? Marcus straightened his cufflinks, his tone perfectly measured. That, he said, is the sound of what you built on disrespect collapsing in real time. He turned and walked away, the red stain on his shirt gleaming like quiet victory under the chandelier light. No one spoke. Even the clinking of glasses sounded guilty. Evelyn's husband whispered, What did you do? Marcus paused near the door, looking back just once. I didn't do anything, he said. I just stopped pretending to forget. And with that, he left the room, the orchestra frozen, the champagne turning bitter in every glass. Outside, under the cool night air, Rachel joined him. It's done, she said softly. Marcus nodded. Then let the lesson begin. By the time Marcus reached the car, the city had already started whispering. News moved faster than traffic, faster than reason. Inside the ballroom, phones were lighting up one by one like a chain of consequences spreading in real time. Evelyn Hale's laughter, once the loudest sound in the room, had vanished into a silence so sharp it almost hummed. Her husband, Richard Hale, sat frozen at their table. His phone kept buzzing emails, alerts, notifications from trading terminals. The Hale Group's liquidity report flashed access denied. The digital contracts on the $2 billion partnership now bore a new status. Nullified. Evelyn stared at the screen over his shoulder, her face draining of color. That's impossible, she said. It's a glitch. Richard's voice cracked. It's not a glitch, Evelyn. He owns the system. The realization fell over her like cold water. The same man she'd insulted in front of 200 guests had just shut down her family's empire quietly, cleanly, legally. Meanwhile, outside, Marcus's black car slid through the downtown lights. He sat in silence, hands resting lightly on the wheel of control he never flaunted but always held. Beside him, Rachel watched the city pass by neon signs, mirrored windows, and the faint reflection of his calm expression. They'll come after you for this, she said softly. They'll try, he replied. But arrogance doesn't chase truth. It hides from it. Rachel smiled faintly. You could have humiliated her publicly, Marcus. Instead, you gave her silence. He looked out the window. Because humiliation teaches nothing. Loss does. Back at the gala, the orchestra had stopped entirely. Guests whispered into their champagne glasses, trying not to meet Evelyn's eyes. The pianist quietly packed his sheet music, sensing the evening was over. A journalist from Business Daily slipped out, already composing the headline in his head. $2 B. Partnership ends mid-gala. Carter withdraws, Hale Group in freefall. The story would hit the airwaves before dessert. Evelyn's diamond earrings trembled as she spoke. Richard, call him. Fix it. Richard didn't move. His gaze was distant, locked on the word terminated glowing across the phone screen. You can't fix what he saw, Evelyn, he said. He saw you. Her voice broke. I didn't mean it like that. Richard laughed bitterly. That's the problem. You did. You just thought it didn't matter. In that moment, Evelyn realized the cruelest truth of all. She had mistaken his silence for submission. Outside, Marcus's phone buzzed again. Rachel read the alert. Media breaking story. Hale shares plummeting. Marcus simply nodded. Then they're learning. The driver pulled into the private hangar of Horizon Air, where a sleek jet waited under soft white lights. Marcus stepped out, adjusting his jacket as Rachel followed with the tablet in hand. What's next? She asked. He stopped for a moment at the bottom of the stairs, his gaze on the horizon. Next, we build what comes after arrogance, he said, and we do it quietly. Rachel looked up at him. You really don't enjoy this, do you? He smiled faintly. Power isn't pleasure. It's precision. Back in the city, Evelyn stood in the middle of the ballroom as guests began to leave in polite, uncomfortable silence. Her husband's phone kept buzzing. The orchestra's instruments clinked softly into their cases. And somewhere, in every person's mind, one truth burned clear. Marcus Carter hadn't raised his voice, hadn't called security, hadn't demanded retribution. He had simply withdrawn his presence, and the entire world shifted to fill the silence he left behind. In that silence, wealth looked small. Evelyn looked down at her red gown, the same color as the stain she'd left on his shirt. For the first time, she understood. She hadn't spilled wine. She'd spilled legacy. And in the quiet hum of the empty ballroom, where gold and glass still glittered without warmth, Evelyn Hale whispered to no one but herself. He warned me. A C present. The next morning, the world woke up to the aftershock. Horizon FinTech withdraws from $2B Hale deal blazed across every business feed, followed by a smaller line that carried far more weight. Insiders cite breach of ethics at gala event. The footage from the party, Marcus walking out with quiet authority, Evelyn frozen in disbelief, had gone viral overnight. No statement, no shouting, just silence that looked like power. At 6 a.m., the Hale mansion in Upper Manhattan was flooded with reporters. Richard Hale's security tried to keep them back, but the damage was already inside. Shares had fallen 43% overnight. Investors were calling for emergency meetings. Partners wanted answers that didn't exist. Evelyn stood at the edge of the balcony, staring down at the flashing cameras below. Her red gown was gone, replaced with a gray silk robe that made her look smaller than she ever had. Richard entered the room, eyes sunken from sleeplessness. Say something, she whispered. Fix this before it's too late. He shook his head. You don't fix this, Evelyn. You survive it. Her lip trembled. It was one comment. Richard looked at her, exasperated. No, it was a mirror, and everyone saw what was in it. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus was already seated in the Horizon conference room, sipping black coffee while Rachel briefed him. The board's unanimous, she said. They're standing behind you. Our shares hit a new record high at open. The media's calling it the Carter effect. Marcus gave a small smile. Catchy. They also want an official statement. Every outlet's calling. He shook his head. No statements. No interviews. Let the facts speak. When truth stands tall, you don't need to hold a microphone. Rachel hesitated. You know this isn't just about them anymore, right? The story's bigger than the deal now. He looked at her, calm but certain. Good. Then maybe they'll start talking about behavior instead of balance sheets. She smiled faintly. That's not how Wall Street works. Marcus leaned back. Then it's time it learned. At that same hour, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a message from her husband's PR firm. Damage control impossible. Recommend stepping down from all public-facing roles. Her fingers trembled as she typed back. And Marcus? Will he talk? The reply came instantly. He doesn't need to. Back at Horizon, One of Marcus's senior advisors entered the room, uneasy. "You do realize," he said, "you've made a lot of enemies in the last 24 hours." Marcus looked up from his tablet, unbothered. They weren't friends to begin with. They just hadn't been tested. 8. Dawn. 16 now. He stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the skyline. People forget that silence is also strategy. The loudest person in the room rarely holds the pen. The advisor fell quiet. Rachel watched him from behind, the morning sun turning his silhouette into a line between power and principle. She spoke softly. "You could have ruined her publicly, Marcus. You didn't." He turned to her. "Because the world was watching, and it needed to see something different that dignity can destroy louder than revenge ever could." Down below, New York moved at its usual pace, horns, screens, people chasing what they thought was control. But up here, Marcus Carter had already redefined it. Across town, Evelyn stood before a mirror, staring at her reflection. She could still see the moment replaying in her mind, the glass tipping, the red splash, his calm eyes meeting hers. She had wanted to stain his shirt. Instead, she had stained her name. And as the morning light filled her room, the cruel truth dawned fully. Wealth could buy silence, but not forgiveness. Meanwhile, Marcus adjusted his cufflinks and murmured to himself, "They thought last night was an ending." He looked up, eyes steady on the horizon. It was a beginning. By afternoon, the storm had become a spectacle. News anchors debated morality between commercials for luxury cars. Investors rushed to distance themselves from the hails. Every major outlet had plastered Evelyn's face under headlines that screamed, "The $2 billion mistake." Marcus Carter, on the other hand, hadn't said a single word. He didn't need to. Silence, when it comes from someone powerful, becomes its own kind of statement. Inside his office at Horizon Tower, the air was calm, classical music playing softly, sunlight spilling over clean glass and chrome. Rachel entered with a folder. "The Hales have been calling nonstop," she said. "They've sent letters, lawyers, and now—" She hesitated, placing her phone on his desk. "Evelyn herself." Marcus didn't look up from his laptop. "What does she want?" "She says she wants to apologize. Privately." He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Apologies after collapse aren't repentance," he said. "They're negotiation." Rachel nodded slowly. "Do you want me to block her number?" He thought for a moment, then closed the laptop. "No," he said quietly. "I'll answer this one." Rachel handed him the phone and stepped out. Marcus waited a few seconds before pressing accept. The line opened with shaky silence. Then Evelyn's voice, small, unsteady, nothing like the woman who'd poured wine on him under golden light. "Marcus, I know you don't owe me your time, but please just hear me out." He said nothing. She exhaled shakily. I shouldn't have said what I did. I thought I was being clever. It was stupid, cruel, and I'm sorry." Still silence. "Marcus," she pleaded, "you have to believe me. I didn't realize what I was doing. I was drunk, embarrassed. Everyone expects me to." He finally spoke, voice calm, measured. "Evelyn, stop." She froze. "You weren't drunk," he said. "You were comfortable. You thought my presence was permission. You thought I'd swallow your insult because men like me are trained to be gracious when we're disrespected. But you forgot something. Grace isn't weakness. It's choice." Evelyn's breath caught. "I just want a chance to fix it." "You can't fix it," Marcus interrupted softly. "You can only learn from it. That's what real loss does. It educates the soul." There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "Do you hate me?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes on the skyline. "No," he said. "Hate's noisy. I prefer silence." Tears cracked her voice. "You took everything from us." He shook his head slowly. "No, Evelyn. You handed it to me when you thought class was louder than character." She said nothing. The sound of her breathing was the only proof she was still there. Then, almost gently, Marcus said, "You wanted power, Evelyn. You had it. But power isn't how high you stand, it's how you treat people who can't touch you." The silence on the line stretched until she whispered, "What happens now?" He replied, "Now the world forgets your name and remembers the lesson. Even Master got a backed is for." The call ended with a soft click. Marcus set the phone down like it had no weight at all. Rachel stepped back in. "Did she say what you thought she'd say?" He nodded once. "Yes." She finally heard herself. Rachel hesitated. "And what about you?" He smiled faintly, not out of satisfaction, but completion. I didn't do this to destroy her, Rachel. I did it so the next man who looks like me doesn't have to explain why he belongs in the room. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the city below, relentless, alive, unaware that history had just quietly reset itself. Rachel looked out the window with him. You know, the world's calling this your revenge. Marcus's gaze didn't move. They can call it what they want, he said softly. I call it alignment. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on one by one like truth revealing itself at dusk. By the next sunrise, the story had evolved into a movement. What began as a scandal over spilled wine had transformed into a cultural storm, an emblem of dignity, restraint, and the quiet recalibration of power. Hashtags flooded the digital world. Number the Carter effect, number power in silence, number black dignity unshaken. Clips from the gala spread across every platform, viewed millions of times. The way Marcus had stood there calm, deliberate, commanding without a word became the new definition of elegance. But Marcus never posted, never spoke. He didn't need to. Silence, when earned, carries its own volume. Inside Horizon Tower, Rachel scrolled through the feed on her tablet. You're everywhere, she said softly. News, think pieces, late-night shows. They're calling you the man who changed the meaning of revenge. Marcus looked up from his desk, amused but distant. I didn't change anything. I just reminded them what respect looks like when it refuses to apologize for itself. Rachel smiled. You know you could use this. Build a foundation, a message. He cut her off gently. I didn't start this for applause. The moment I turn it into a brand, it loses its truth. She nodded. She understood. His calm wasn't for show, it was philosophy. Across town, Evelyn Hale sat alone in her penthouse, curtains drawn against the morning light. The phone rang endlessly. Journalists, board members, lawyers. She didn't answer any of them. She just watched the video on repeat, her own laughter, her glass tipping, Marcus's eyes steady as the wine hit his shirt. Every replay felt heavier, not because of what the world saw, but because of what she finally saw in herself. In another corner of the city, a group of young black professionals gathered in a cafe before work. The clip played on one of their phones. Man didn't raise his voice once, one said. Didn't have to, another replied. That's real control. They watched in silence for a moment, heads nodding in quiet pride. One woman whispered, he showed the world what we've been trying to say for years, we don't need to shout to matter. Back at Horizon, Marcus was reviewing a proposal from the board. A new initiative, scholarships, mentorship programs, partnerships with historically black universities. Rachel placed the folder on his desk. They want to name it after you. He closed the file. No names, he said. Just purpose. If we do this, it's for impact, not image. Rachel tilted her head. You're aware that right now. You're an icon. He gave a small laugh, genuine this time. Icons fade. Systems last. Let's build one. That night, the media camped outside his building. Lights, cameras, questions fired like sparks into the cold evening air. Marcus stepped out, walking toward his car. The crowd swelled, microphones extended. Mr. Carter, what's your message to the public? Do you forgive Evelyn Hale? Was this revenge? He stopped, turned slightly, and faced them with that same unshakable calm. No revenge, he said quietly. Just reflection. And reflection changes more than anger ever could. The reporters went silent. The air suddenly heavy with the realization that they weren't talking to a man chasing a headline, they were witnessing one. He got into his car and shut the door, the sound of it muffled, final. Rachel looked over at him as the driver pulled away. You know they'll turn this into documentaries, books, maybe even a film. Marcus's eyes stayed on the skyline. Let them, he said. As long as they tell the truth that power isn't what you do when the world watches, but how you behave when it doesn't. The city lights blurred past, gold streaks against glass. Somewhere between movement and memory, Marcus Carter's silence had become something larger than justice. It had become standard. By midweek, the media machine was in full pursuit. Every network wanted him. Every magazine dangled exclusive deals. Even talk shows, the ones that normally traded in scandal, not substance, sent offers with seven-figure checks attached. But Marcus Carter didn't answer a single one. He'd built his empire by understanding timing, and the most powerful moment, he always said, wasn't when you speak, but when you choose not to. Rachel stood by his office window, flipping through an inbox full of interview requests. CNN, The Guardian, Forbes, even Vogue, she said. They all want your perspective. Marcus didn't look up from his laptop. Perspective isn't for sale. She crossed her arms. You know, most people would kill for this kind of spotlight. He smiled faintly. That's why most people never keep it. Rachel sighed. You're aware that by staying silent, you're only making them want you more? He finally looked up. Good. Maybe they'll start listening instead of consuming. Outside the window, the skyline shimmered under afternoon light towers of glass that reflected ambition and broke under arrogance. Meanwhile, across the city, Evelyn Hale was being escorted into a studio for an exclusive interview. She wore black, the color of contrition, and carried herself like someone walking into a courtroom. The anchor's voice was gentle but surgical. Mrs. Hale, millions watched the video. What would you like to say to the people who think this was racism disguised as privilege? Evelyn swallowed hard. It was privilege. I see that now. I thought I could say anything, joke any way I wanted. I was wrong. The anchor leaned forward. Have you spoken to Marcus Carter since? Her voice cracked. Once, he said. Silence was his answer. The clip went viral before the broadcast even ended. Silence was his answer became the most quoted line of the week. A phrase painted on murals, printed on t-shirts, and captioned beneath photos of Marcus walking away from the gala. At Horizon Tower, Rachel played the clip on her tablet. You realize you've become a symbol, right? People are using your silence as philosophy now. Marcus was reviewing blueprints for Horizon's new community fund, a project to invest in minority-owned startups. Symbols fade, he said without looking up. But systems, they echo. Rachel studied him. You ever regret not speaking your truth? He looked at her calm, steady. I am my truth. That night, an international journalist managed to intercept him at a private charity event. Cameras flashed. Questions flew like sparks. Mr. Carter, one question, she shouted as he moved toward his car. People call you the face of quiet resistance. Do you agree with that? He paused for just a second, long enough for every lens to capture the moment. Then, with a calm smile, he said, No, I'm just a man who remembered his worth before the world did. The next morning, that single sentence became the headline across 5 continents. In her apartment, Evelyn watched it unfold on the news, tears blurring the screen. She whispered to herself, He's not even fighting me anymore. He's teaching me. It be in equations. It eventually dines on 8. Back at Horizon, Rachel handed Marcus the morning reports. The foundation launch is confirmed. The Carter Standard is trending again. Marcus set down his pen. Then it's time to move the conversation from reaction to responsibility. Rachel smiled. You're turning a scandal into a syllabus. He returned the smile, soft but sure. Because if power doesn't educate, it just repeats itself. As night fell, Marcus stepped out onto the terrace overlooking the city, a skyline stitched with gold and consequence. The wind carried faint echoes of the world still talking about him, still dissecting his calm, but he didn't hear noise anymore. Only rhythm, the quiet pulse of justice done right, he whispered to himself. Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means the truth has already landed. Is reading dollars. And in that moment, the city lights flickered below him, each one like an echo of his restraint, shining quietly, refusing to fade. 2 weeks later, the frenzy had cooled, but the ripple hadn't. What started as a single act of restraint had become a worldwide conversation about power, dignity, and how justice could wear a suit instead of a sword. At Horizon Tower, preparations for a press conference were underway. It wasn't about the scandal anymore. It was about what came next. Marcus Carter had called it the Carter Standard. Reporters from around the world filled the glass atrium. Cameras flashed. Investors, activists, and students filled the back rows. They weren't here to witness a billionaire's redemption story. They were here to see how a man who had turned humiliation into history would redefine leadership itself. When Marcus entered, the noise evaporated. He walked to the podium with that same unshakable calm that had made him a symbol. Rachel followed close behind, her tablet glowing softly under the stage lights. He began simply, without theatrics. When I walked out of that gala, I didn't just end a deal, Marcus said. I ended a pattern. The crowd leaned in. For too long, we've let success excuse arrogance. We've mistaken charm for character and profit for progress. That ends here. Behind him, the screen flickered to life, bold white letters on a black background. The Carter Standard integrity as policy. Marcus continued. The Carter Standard isn't a slogan, it's a system. From this day forward, every Horizon partner and executive will be required to undergo equity accountability audits. Every leadership team will be evaluated not just on performance, but on principle. Respect will be as measurable as revenue. Is Seabrudge and ever parter? A murmur spread through the room, not doubt, but awe. Rachel took the podium next, explaining the framework: independent review boards, transparent reporting, and mentorship programs for marginalized entrepreneurs. If you want to lead under Horizon's name, she said, you lead without bias or you don't lead at all. The applause was hesitant at first, then built like thunder. Marcus stepped forward again, his gaze sweeping the room. This isn't about punishing ignorance, he said. It's about retraining it. We're not here to embarrass anyone. We're here to evolve. A journalist raised a hand. Mr. Carter, do you see this as revenge? He smiled faintly. No. Revenge is emotional. Change is structural. Laughter rippled through the room, not mockery, but respect. Another voice asked, what would you say to the people who think you're moralizing from privilege? End quote. 85. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Privilege isn't the problem, he said. Forgetting where it came from is. I worked my way into rooms that were designed to exclude me, not so I could close the door behind me, but so I could hold it open for others. The applause this time was instant, sincere. Cameras flashed like stars under glass. Backstage, as the press conference ended, Rachel found him standing by the window, looking down at the crowd leaving the building. You realize what you just did, right? She said quietly. You turned a moment into a movement. He smiled. No, they did. I just gave them language for it. Rachel exhaled slowly. Do you think Evelyn Hale was watching? Marcus didn't look away from the view. Probably, he said. And I hope she sees that this was never about her. It was about all the rooms that let her laughter echo. Across town, Evelyn was watching. Alone in her penthouse, TV glow reflecting off her face. She didn't cry this time. She just listened. Every word hit differently, not like accusation, but like instruction. He turned his silence into scripture, she whispered to herself. On social media, clips of the event exploded again. Headlines read, from scandal to standard, Marcus Carter redefines corporate ethics. The man who taught the world how to win quietly. But Marcus didn't stay to watch the coverage. He left through a side exit, walking into the cool night air. Rachel caught up with him at the curb. No celebration? She asked. He looked up at the skyline, the same one that had once watched him be humiliated, and now bowed quietly under his reform. Justice doesn't need fireworks, he said. It needs follow-through. They drove in silence for a while. The city lights blurred past warm gold against deep blue. Rachel finally spoke. You ever think about what would have happened if you'd reacted that night? If you'd shouted back? Marcus thought for a moment. Then the story would have been about anger, he said. Not accountability. She smiled. And now? He glanced out the window. Now it's about altitude. When the car stopped at a red light, a digital billboard flickered to life across the street. His image from the gala, standing tall in silence, overlaid with the words, "The Carter Standard dignity has no price." Rachel caught him looking and grinned. You sure you don't want to trademark that? He chuckled softly. If you have to trademark truth, you've already lost it. As the light turned green, the car glided forward through the heartbeat of the city, a city now quieter, wiser, fairer. And somewhere far above, the night sky seemed to shimmer a little differently, as if the stars themselves were adjusting to a higher standard. Weeks later, the noise had faded, but the impact hadn't. Across boardrooms and universities, the Carter Standard was now policy, not trend. Marcus never sought the spotlight again. He didn't need to. His silence had become scripture, his calm a curriculum. One evening, standing on the terrace of Horizon Tower, he watched the city lights blink beneath him. Rachel joined him quietly. You changed the game, she said. Marcus smiled. No, he murmured. I just reminded it of its rules. And below, the skyline breathed steadier, fairer, finally listening.